So, boys, the Patriots, what the
Welcome to the first episode of the Inbound Podcast. I'm Umbrish, and I'm here with.
Anthony.
And Adam.
And the Patriots literally went on a $202 million spending spree yesterday.
In doing so, they signed Jonnu Smith, Nelson Aguilar, Hunter Henry, Matthew Judon, and Kendrick Bourne.
So it's clear that Bill Belichick's in a chess match with Tom Brady. Tom Brady goes to Tampa Bay, wins the Super Bowl, and now Bill Belichick's trying to do his thing. So, boys, what do you think of these moves?
Honestly, I think it makes them a real contender because Cam Newton, I think, is actually a decent quarterback. I just think last year he didn't have any weapons to go to, and especially since they lost Gronk a couple years back, signing Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry are going to be great additions to their wide receiver corps.
Do you think Nelson Aguilar is underrated or overrated?
I personally think he's underrated. I really like the stuff he did in Oakland, or Vegas. Obviously, had a few rough years with Philly. They kind of ran him out of town, but I think he's a really good wide receiver too. And also looking at it, they have the 15th overall pick in the draft, and I think there's a lot of good receivers this year. And I think if they can draft like a Rashad Bateman or a Jamar Chase, I think Cam Newton might have a great year.
Well, don't you think Jamar Chase might go a little bit earlier to because I feel like the Lions are a team that need a lot of wide receiver help, especially since we're losing Marvin Jones and Kenny Galladay. So I think the Lions might actually pick up Devonta Smith or Jamar Chase, whoever's left in the draft.
Yeah, I think a more realistic option is definitely Bateman, and I think Bateman might actually be my favorite receiver in this class. He looks eerily similar to Justin Jefferson last year.
Yeah, honestly, I'm thinking that there are certainly some other teams that are going to be looking for wide receivers. As you said, Umbrish, I think he's a good wide receiver too. I think the Patriots are really just missing that wide receiver one that could really put Cam Newton over the top. Despite the fact that I think he's not the best quarterback, you seem to be pretty up on him. I don't think he's the best, but I think if you give him the weapons, as Bill Belichick is currently trying to do, I think and you build around him, I think you can make him into a franchise quarterback and make the Patriots a real team.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of quarterbacks that I wouldn't have over Cam Newton. I think Cam Newton, like at his best, is a top 15 quarterback, and I'd put him around like the 15 range. I don't think he's an elite quarterback, but like there's so many quarterbacks right now that are the worse than Cam, and I think Cam he kind of got screwed because he had literally no one to throw to last year.
And you talked about how Nelson Aguilar can be a wide receiver too, and they don't really have a wide receiver one. Where does that leave Julian Edelman? Is Julian Edelman going to be their wide receiver one?
That's true. I mean, he was on that team, and I kind of forgot that he was even there just because the Patriots have not been great. And, of course, when Julian Edelman is on a team, he's normally a big factor in the team's production. But he simply wasn't that this year. And I think, honestly, that's more of Cam being in a new place versus him because he was one of their biggest producers on offense. So I think he's still going to continue to be a staple. I don't think he's a wide receiver one.
So do you think they take a wide receiver in the draft, or do they take Mac Jones? Because I see a lot of draft predictions saying that the Patriots will take Mac Jones at 15.
I think I'm not inside Bill Belichick's mind, but I think they're going to go for a wide receiver. I think if you're really trying to do something with Cam and trying to build around Cam, which is what it seems like they're doing, I think you go for a wide receiver and continue to build up.
That makes sense. And also, I think Matthew Judon coming in as a linebacker is going to be a good replacement to Van Noy because they lose Van Noy in free agency. And honestly, he was kind of a big staple of that front seven.
Yeah, they really missed him last year. He went to Miami last year. They had Chung opt out, Hightower opt out. So him coming in to pair with Hightower and Chung, that's a good defense there.
So do you think this defense is going to be good enough to come and compete against an offense like the Chiefs?
I don't think anyone can really compete with the Chiefs outside of Tampa Bay, I guess, because I think, especially with the Chiefs signing Thuney, I don't think there's really anyone that can stop them if they're at 100%. But there's not many defenses I think that can line up or on paper that are as good as New England.
Will New England become a contender? Because, I mean, they're signing a bunch of weapons right now. They have a decent they have a decent defense, especially since a lot of players will be coming back after opting out of the 2020 season. I think they could actually make a run for an AFC championship and potentially make the Super Bowl. However, I think it is still unlikely, and that the Chiefs will end up going back to the Super Bowl for the third straight year.
For me, Brish, I'm thinking, they went 7-9 last year. I'm thinking 7-9 to maybe 8-8.
I would say 10-6 as well. I think they're in the tier like 2 of teams in the AFC. I think no one's going to be with Kansas City. Obviously, I think Buffalo's up there too. But I think they're in a tier 2. I think they're a good team, and obviously they're coached by the greatest coach of all time. So that's going to help them.
I mean, we can look at it. So week 1 they play the Falcons, which honestly I think Matt Ryan's kind of washed now. So I think they'll beat the Falcons. Probably lose to Buffalo because I think Buffalo might be a Super Bowl contender next year, especially with that really good offense, and they have a pretty solid defense. It's just we have to see if they can actually compete with the Chiefs.
Right.
They'll probably beat Carolina, especially because they're losing Curtis Samuel, who was one of their best wide receivers last year, and we'll have to see how healthy Teddy Bridgewater is. The Texans are a complete question mark because they have Deshaun Watson. They don't know what to do with him yet. They're losing Will Fuller, and which was their number 1 wide receiver last year. So we got to see what their offense looks like. But I'm assuming the Patriots will be able to beat them. So this leaves them at 3-1 through 4 games. The Colts, kind of a question mark there. They have Carson Wentz now. Don't know how that offense is going to look. So that can go either way. Chargers also either way. It really all depends on how that offense looks because they do have Justin Herbert, who honestly deserved Rookie of the Year. He was definitely the best rookie.
And I will say, I think he's an incredible quarterback, and I think they're going to be a lot better this year. And also, they just signed Corey Linsley, too. So give him an offensive line. Keenan Allen, Lindsey.
That was a problem. Justin Herbert was under a lot of pressure last year from opposing defenses.
Oh, yeah.
And honestly, I think that's really besides that and clock management, because honestly their coach kind of screwed up on the clock management a couple of times. So between those two, if they can get those two fixed, I think they'll be a pretty solid team this year. So even if we say Indianapolis and Houston, not Indianapolis and Los Angeles is a loss, that leaves them at 3-3. Miami, they have Tua. Tua was pretty good last year. They have a decent. I think they have actually a really good defense. The Bills, they'll probably lose again. So I guess if they beat Miami, they'll be at 4-4. They play Miami again in Foxborough though, so I think they might take that one. They'll probably split Miami, leaving them at 5-4. Beat the Jets, beat Jacksonville. So 7-4 there. Probably lose to the Titans. So 7-6. Then they have the Saints. They have Tampa. They have Cleveland and the Jets. They probably, if they have this good defense and this offense that looks to be really good, I think they can probably win 3 out of the 4. Their likely loss will be Tampa Bay, and that will leave them with 6 losses and 10 wins.
With the schedule breakdown, I think it becomes a lot more clear. I think they don't have a super hard schedule. So
No.
They play a few really good teams. Like of course they play Buffalo twice. But yeah, I think with that schedule, it's definitely possible.
I'm actually quite surprised because they do not play Kansas City, and if they really want to be in contention to win that AFC championship, I think they have to play Kansas City. And they don't play them in the regular season, so I guess it'll have to come down to how they'll play in the playoffs. But honestly, I think Kansas City is going to come back for a third straight year.
Yeah, I think that's tough. I think especially this year, with all the pay cuts, they just signed Thuney. I think the road to the Super Bowl goes through Arrowhead this year in the AFC.
100%. Hands down, 100%.
I will say I think the Bills could make a run, though. I think Josh Allen, the meteoric, huge rise he's had in the past couple years has been pretty insane to watch. So he's definitely a guy to watch out for.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think Josh Allen was in the MVP contention pretty much all the way throughout the season up until the end. He kind of struggled, I think, in the playoffs, because at least in his last 3 games, he is putting up 40, 50 points against pretty good teams with pretty good defenses. So I think he just got to get those playoff jitters out of the way. I think that was his only downfall of last year. And then one thing I want to talk about is the Lions in free agency.
Oh boy.
Because
Let's go.
we'll see what's up. Because I mean, we were ranked in terms of rushing. We were 38th in defense, 30th in offense. We were the worst defense in terms of points scored, yards allowed, and 30th in passing yards allowed.
Oh my god.
I mean, there's a lot of good offensive linemen and defensive linemen in this year's free agency. So I would like to see one of the Lions pick up someone big on offense or defense. I mean, we re-signed Romeo Cora, which honestly I think is huge because I think he has a lot of potential to come. However, we don't have that big defensive tackle. So I think like a Sheldon Rankins or a Jarrell Casey, who honestly had a down year last year due to injury, so we might even be able to get.
Yeah, I think that defense was hard to watch last year. I mean, a lot of disappointment. But I think a new coaching staff, I really like who they brought in. I think Aaron Glenn's a great hire. I think he's a future head coach, and I think he's really going to help Akuda and Amani out. So
Yeah. I mean, I was very questionable about Okuda, and honestly, he did not perform well last year. But being a cornerback in the NFL is one of the hardest of positions to adjust to from college to the NFL. So we'll see how that will play out in this upcoming year. I really hope he does well because honestly, last draft I was on the Tua train. I really wanted to back up Matthew Stafford.
I think the new problem for the Lions is that last year it was our defense that was totally atrocious and our offense was decent. I don't see our offense even really being okay this year. Like
I mean,
with a new quarterback and we're losing a bunch of weapons. I mean, I think like you're now trying to play it from both sides. Like you now have a really bad defense and your offense isn't going to be that good.
yeah, well, like with the offense, I mean, honestly, our offense last year I think was atrocious, along with their defense. I mean, we got shut out by Carolina. We lost 20-0 against Carolina, and I mean, we didn't have Galladay, but we still have to work around that because we are going to lose players along the way, and especially in free agency, we're losing both Jones and Galladay. So honestly, I wouldn't mind seeing the Lions pick up Will Fuller or Curtis Samuel. We might be able to get Curtis Samuel on a pretty comparably a cheap deal, especially since his last contract was only $6 million.
I will say though, like on the bright side, there are some good young pieces in Detroit. Like I think I like Jared Goff. I don't hate him. I mean, he was just in a Super Bowl a couple years ago, so he still has that arm talent. I think DeAndre Swift is going to explode next year. I think he's going to be really good, especially with Anthony Lynn. Hawkinson is the top 5 tight end in the league. I don't know if you can really debate that. And their O-line, they got Decker and Ragnow, and I think just fill the team around them and build around them, and you're going to have a good offense in a couple years.
I mean, I think adding like a Trent Williams or a Alejandro Villanueva to our offensive line will finish off our offensive line. Because, I mean, we did deal with a couple of injuries on our offensive line, which proved to be pretty bad, especially since we were ranked 30th in rushing offense last year. So, I mean, I wouldn't mind paying big money for even like a Michael Schwartz or Trent Williams.
Right. I think it comes down to coaching, really, at the end of the day. I think if, like, I don't think anybody's really expecting big things this year from the Lions, but I think if you can find a coaching staff that can do a good job, of course, hoping that Dan Campbell is the right guy for that, I think if you can really form the coaching staff into something that is a good product, then the Lions might potentially have victories down the road.
Yeah, I also don't think it's the worst thing in the world to tank this year. I mean, go 4-12, 3-13, and get a top pick. Like, there's some good quarterbacks coming out next year. I think Spencer Rattler out of Oklahoma is, I mean, watching him play is pretty.
Yeah, he's definitely
he's incredible. He's a Heisman contender. Also, Kedon Slovis from USC. He's a really good player, really high completion percentage, and so I think those are a couple of guys that you look at, and I think those are going to be franchise quarterbacks in the NFL. And if Jared Goff doesn't work out, we don't win a ton of games next year, I think we're still going to be fine with that.
Well, I have to agree with Adam. I think it does come down to coaching because, honestly, Patricia was a terrible coach. I didn't like him when he came to Detroit at first, mainly because he had zero head coaching experience. At least Dan Campbell was an assistant head coach at New Orleans, which will play a big difference in the way he conducts business. And honestly, he's very energetic. He's very lively. He's young. I think he is going to be a really good fit for the Lions organization. We just have to see how we do in the off season, because we have good players. I feel like last year a lot of it came down to injuries and coaches.
Oh yeah.
For sure. I guess moving on, like going back to free agency, do any of you guys have some like bolder predictions that you think are going to come true?
Well, before we started the podcast, I had the Patriots signing a big tight end, and then they ended up signing Hunter Henry from Los Angeles. I mean, I had him on my fantasy team. I'm gonna say he proved really well for me, and I mean I think he's a top 10 tight end in the league.
Mhm.
So, I think that was a very good pickup, and it gives Cam Newton an additional weapon.
Hmm. So I think going off that, I think they're going to continue their spending spree. I think they're really trying to build up and essentially counter Tom Brady. I think what he's done, and I think they're going to sign Leonard Fournette. I think that's their next big signing.
Oh my God.
To pair with Damian Harris.
Do you think it's a competition versus Tom Brady?
I do. I think
Sort
it's a
of
chess
revenge.
match. I think Bill Belichick, I think he wants to counter Brady. And obviously, I think he's just a really good coach and trying to do whatever he needs to do to help his team win. But I think there's a little extra incentive to, counter what Tom Brady has done.
I think that's honestly, Anthony, I think that's a great prediction. Of course, the Patriots had a huge hole at the running back position last year. I mean, they just were not able to get anything done on that front. I mean, they basically just used Cam Newton to run the ball,
Yeah.
as many teams do that use him. So, I mean, I think signing a good running back, a proven running back, which Leonard Fournette has essentially proven that he is a running back one. I think it would be a good move for the Patriots if they do that.
Mm-hmm.
Especially since Sony Michel seems sort of like a bust.
Mm-hmm.
I gotta be honest. He has not performed to the caliber I was expecting out of college. I mean, when he was in his draft class, I think he was, if the best, I think it's the best, if not top 5, or even top 3 in this draft class.
I believe he was #1 prospect. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. And he just hasn't proven himself as an NFL running back. I don't know if it's his size, if it's his speed, but I mean, I think he will most likely be a career backup or out of the league pretty soon.
Right, yeah.
You guys see Drew Brees retired. Big legend's gone. So now I guess this leaves a hole for the Saints. I mean, I really like Taysom Hill, the Swift Army Knight.
I don't see him as a starter. I think I really like Jameis Winston. I've always been on the Jameis Winston train. I know he throws all those picks, but I think if there's one person that can help him, it's Sean Payton. I think next year, what they should do is run kind of like a hybrid offense, similar to what they did with Drew Brees, but with more Taysom Hill, like 2/3 Jameis Winston, 1/3 Taysom Hill. I think is a good combination to win some games.
And that would be something that the NFL has pretty much never seen. That's the thing, is Taysom Hill is such an interesting player because he really is unlike anybody I've ever seen. I mean, the fact that you can have one quarterback and then essentially sign him to a QB contract alongside Jameis Winston, and you basically have 2 quarterbacks. And I think that's a real possibility. What you said, Anthony, is basically Jameis Winston wins the starting job, but then you continue to use Taysom Hill regardless.
Yeah, you can't pay a quarterback 4 years, $140 million. That's elite QB1 money. I still can't believe they did that. But even though it's voidable every year, that's still stunning to me. But I think so. You have to use him. You can't.
I think he'll start next year. I think.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, the way he performed the 4 or 5 games that Drew Brees was out with that rib injury, I honestly think he'll prove himself as a starting quarterback. I mean, he did have that one game against the Eagles, which he didn't look very good. But especially because you can run a triple threat offense with Kamara and Taysom Hill, and that is actually, I feel like, is a very deadly combo, especially in the NFL where running, at least recently, it looks like running the ball has played a big difference in who the elite teams are versus who the not so good teams are.
Can't forget about Mike Thomas either. I mean, that guy's a top 5 receiver when he's healthy. I don't think there's any debating that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, he was injured last year, very unproductive season, but honestly, I think though they lose Drew Brees, who was he was a Hall of Fame quarterback,
Yeah.
I can still see the Saints being a pretty good team next year, even though I still have them losing to the Patriots.
I don't have them being great. I have them being like probably 6-10 if I had to guess. I just think they're losing so many guys because of their cap issues that I think next
Right.
year they take a year to fix their cap issues and then build up after that.
Do you think they sacrifice more on offense or on defense?
You got to sacrifice everywhere. They got so many guys on big money contracts that like I think they're screwed this year, frankly. But
I mean, it's got to help with Breeze retiring to free up some money.
for sure, yeah. But I mean, what were they? 80 million over the cap or something like that? That's
Yeah.
just you can't do that. That's historic levels of being above the cap.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so we got March Madness coming up,
Oh
Let's
yeah.
go. Fired up.
and I mean, honestly, I'm really excited for this year's March Madness. I think there's a lot of great teams, and I think there's going to be a lot of upsets this year.
I do too. I have quite a few
Mm.
upsets in mind, but yeah, it should be a good year. I'm also excited to see it be in more of a bubble format. Like it's not a true bubble like the NBA was, but watching the NBA playoffs last year with everyone in one area was just so much fun to watch.
And honestly, I think it brings a whole nother dynamic to what March Madness is, because
Sure.
now, since there's no audience, the team is the audience.
Right.
And I feel like this will prove who has the best chemistry,
Mm-hmm.
who is able to feed off their own bench. And I don't know, it'll be very, very interesting to see.
Wow. Yeah, I think that's very true. Very true.
All right, so I think we should just go region by region and talk about any like significant upsets we have. So
Well, do you have
Very
any
interesting,
round
yeah.
one upsets? Like major round one
Oh,
upsets?
God, I have a few. This was one of my predictions I had for March Madness. I think a 12 seed or higher has an upset in each region in the first round. So I can just skim through them all. We can go talk about them more in depth later. But I have Ohio beating Virginia in the first round. I have Georgetown beating Colorado, Michigan State beating BYU, which is 11 seed. But let's see, Winthrop beating Villanova. Colgate 14 seeding beating Arkansas. Really like Colgate. We'll talk about them later. And then Rutgers beating Clemson. That's a 10 seed, but still,
Yeah, I mean, I have
Still
Michigan
Rutgers.
over BYU as well, and then I think
Interesting.
I have Maryland over UConn, and then I also had Rutgers over Clemson.
For me, I don't have a ton of upsets, but I actually have some of the upsets that you have going, Anthony. I just don't have those at all. But for starters, I do have. Let me see. I have Bona over LSU. I have Georgetown over Colorado. And I also have Maryland over UConn. I think that's one in particular that is a pretty clear possibility, pretty strong possibility.
I think that's actually a really interesting matchup. I think UConn, they have a star player there, James Bouknight, who's I've watched him play a couple times, and he's really good. He can score the ball like very few people in college basketball can. So I think that's a team where they're either going to make the Elite Eight or they're going to crash out pretty early.
Right.
And
Well, go ahead.
okay, I think that's why I have Maryland winning that actually, because they had the Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year in Morcell, and I think he's going to lock up Bouknight. So
Yeah, honestly, Morcell's a base. Like, I have Maryland over UConn as well, and honestly, the Big East is kind of beat up this year. I mean, they have Creighton and they have Villanova, but besides that, they don't really have anybody. And also, UConn doesn't have any big wins. They've lost all against all of their ranked opponents. And then, but Maryland can make it close. Like if you saw the first half of the Michigan versus Maryland game in the Big Ten tourney, Michigan was down big
Yeah.
until the very end when Morcell had to leave. So if they can keep Morcell out of foul trouble, I think Maryland will be able to sweep UConn. And also,
Sure.
they have beaten good teams like Illinois. They beat Minnesota when they were good, and they beat Wisconsin. So I think Maryland over UConn is a pretty clear upset.
they killed Michigan State twice too. Add that on. Michigan State's a tournament team. They're not, an elite team, but
Yeah.
two big wins against them.
Well, speaking about the MSU game, I have MSU over BYU because BYU has no staple wins. They're in the West Coast Conference, but let's be honest, they got Gonzaga and nobody else.
Hmm.
Whereas MSU's shown that when they're clicking, they can beat good teams. They have the most top 5 wins in the nation this year, beating Ohio State, Illinois, Michigan. But the thing that does scare me is they do have some bad losses. There's losses to Maryland, there's losses to Rutgers, losses to Purdue. Michigan State's kind of a wild card, honestly, in this tournament
Right.
because they have the potential to be great, but just something's not clicking, and it's too hard to see what it is.
And that's kind of uncharacteristic of Michigan State, I feel like, because Tom Izzo is a great coach, proven coach, one of the best coaches of all time. But they've just been very inconsistent, and I feel like that's not super characteristic of him as a coach and Michigan State as a team.
Right. I think it's just they don't have a true point guard and they don't have a true center, and those are probably the two most important positions in basketball. Like you look at not the way not who they've lost to, but how they lost. They lost to Rutgers by 30, Iowa by 30, just because they can't stop some of those elite big men, can't stop some of those scoring guards. And they do have a star in Aaron Henry, but he can only do so much.
Right.
Yeah, like even when they played Michigan with Hunter Dickinson, who's a true freshman, I think he put up like 22 or 25 points against Michigan State in that first matchup.
Right.
So what about any round 2 upsets that stand out?
Let's see. I have Nova continuing to the Elite Eight, and a little bit more on Nova later, but I have them beating Purdue in the second round. As well as that, I have, let's see, I have Tennessee over Oklahoma State. But I don't have too many upsets. Like none that are crazy. Like maybe some between like a 2 and a 3 seed, or Nova is a 5 versus Purdue being a 4 seed. But I don't have any super crazy second round upsets.
I will say, going back to Villanova, I thought they were going to go far, but then they lost Colin Gillespie, their star player, towards his ACL or his Achilles or something like that, and that's going to kill them. They were not the same team after that. That's why I got Winthrop over them. But the second round, I got my biggest upset is probably USC over Iowa. Oh, and actually, scratch that. My biggest one is LSU over Michigan. That is my biggest upset of the tournament for sure. I think if Isaiah Livers can't come back, Michigan's in trouble.
I totally agree, and especially because LSU has played pretty well. They played really well against Bama in the SEC championship, but I still think Michigan has the better talent and will be able to outlast them. So I have them outlasting them, but barely though.
Yeah, and this year LSU is a young team, but they've always been able to score the basketball. But just recently, they've been starting to lock up, and they're scary. I was watching some of their SEC championship, and they got some good players there. They're scary.
Going back to the Nova over Purdue, I also have Nova beating Purdue. Purdue has losses to Maryland and Minnesota, and that was late in the season when, honestly, those two teams are not great. Whereas Nova is the Big East regular season champs, and they have wins against Creighton and Texas, who are good teams, and so even with their star player out, I still think Nova has the talent to beat Purdue, but I think it'll be a very close game nonetheless. You guys have any upsets in that Sweet 16 round?
My biggest ones, I have LSU beating Florida State. Again, I really like what they have going there. I think they beat Florida State. But other than that, not a ton. I'm really excited. I'm excited to see Illinois, Oklahoma State. I really like Cade Cunningham. I think he's clearly the best NBA prospect. He was first-team All-American, and he can do everything. So,
Yeah,
Wow.
Adam,
I
you
guess LSU.
had Oklahoma State over Tennessee over Oklahoma State. Why is that? Because honestly, I think Oklahoma State is one of the hottest teams in the country right now.
I had I just think that Tennessee has some potential. I know Oklahoma State has been on a killing spree, but I think they've got what it takes, and in fact, I have them actually losing to Illinois in the Sweet 16 because of it.
Yeah, like I have Kansas over Iowa in the Sweet 16 because Kansas has wins against Baylor, Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, Texas Tech, West Virginia, and Creighton, whereas Iowa at least recently hasn't looked the same as because I don't know what's like Garza seems a little bit off. It doesn't seem like they're the shots that they were at the beginning of the season at least. So I think Kansas will be able to overtake Iowa. I got Texas over Bama. I mean, Texas has wins against Oklahoma State, Texas Tech, Oklahoma, and Kansas. However, honestly, I think the SEC is a little bit overrated this year. The only good teams that are in the SEC are Arkansas and Missouri. However, Alabama lost to both of those teams throughout the regular season. So I don't know. I don't think Bama is the. I mean, people say Bama's the best 2 seed. I'm
Wow.
not
think
sure
they are.
about that. I honestly think either Ohio State or Iowa are the best 2 seeds.
I think I really like Alabama. They kind of remind me of like Miami Heat from the NBA playoffs last year. Like they're just gonna grind you, and I think they got some good guards in Herb Jones and Javon Quinterly. But I think I have them going to the Final Four. I think they're just gonna wear teams down. So
Right.
And then I have West Virginia over Houston as well because, I mean,
Interesting.
West Virginia made the Baylor game really close. They got wins against Kansas, Texas Tech, and Texas. Whereas Houston hasn't played a ranked opponent since Texas Tech, which was in November. And let's be honest, there's no one even close in the American Conference. So I think Houston gets a lot of wins in that conference because it's so weak. However, I don't think they'll be able to win against a really good West Virginia team, especially with that high-scoring offense.
I actually have the opposite of you, Ambrish. I have Houston over West Virginia in the Sweet 16. Not really for any particular reason. Again, I just think the March Madness is crazy. I think despite the fact that West Virginia may be underseeded, maybe they should have the 2 seed instead of Houston. I just think that they're going to choke.
I got West Virginia over. I got West Virginia over Houston for sure. I think West Virginia played a gauntlet at the end of the year, and I think that's really going to help them. And I think Bob Huggins is one of the best coaches in the country, very underrated. So I got to make in the Elite Eight.
And then I think my biggest upset is definitely Kansas over Gonzaga. People have Gonzaga as the number 1 seed, the number 1 overall seed in March Madness. However, Gonzaga hasn't played anybody since December, in which they played Virginia. The only staple win I would say would be against Iowa. And their strength of schedule is terrible compared to teams like Michigan, Illinois, Baylor, and Iowa. I mean, they're ranked 86, whereas Michigan is ranked 20th, Illinois is 2nd, Baylor is 68th, and Iowa is 14th. So I just don't think they're good enough. I mean, they definitely have so much talent, but I think just not playing anybody for so long will become a handicap for them.
Yeah, I have Gonzaga losing in the Elite Eight also. This time to Iowa, though. I just think, I think they're going to get their revenge. Luka Garza is something special, and they have so many three-point shooters. It can get frustrating to watch when you're going against them, but because you have to pick your poison. You got to stop Luka Garza and have them rain threes on you, or you guard the three-point line and have Luka Garza take over the game. So
I have the same as you, Anthony, for the exact same reason. I think that I think Iowa has just got what it takes, and Gonzaga simply won't be able to stop the rain of threes and Luka Garza at the same time.
Mm-hmm. But I will say Gonzaga does have some star power, though. I mean, Jalen Suggs, Kispert, and Timmy. There were some. I mean, they have 3 All-Americans. When was the last time that happened? I think it was Illinois in 05, and that's tough to do. So they have a lot of offensive firepower.
So who do you have in your Final Four? Because I have Michigan, but the only reason why I have Michigan is because I'm assuming that offense is going to get back to normal because on their 3, they lost basically every other game since the Illinois game. And on all of their losses, they have shot less than 40% from the field. So, I mean, even if they can get that up to 45%, I mean, they would have beaten Michigan State. They would have beaten Ohio State. And so I'm hoping that offense can get back to normal. I mean, they'll have a game against Texas Southern and LSU, which I think they'll be able to hopefully find their rhythm, beat Florida State, and make it to the Final Four. I actually have Kansas beating Gonzaga. I don't think Gonzaga is as good as everybody says they are. They have a lot of talent. However, they just haven't played anybody in so long that I think will prove to be a caveat. And then I kind of got Baylor just running through the South. I mean, I think Ohio State. I think Ohio State's the 3rd worst 2 seed behind Alabama and Iowa, and then obviously Houston being the worst 2 seed. And I think Baylor will just run Ohio State off the court in the Elite Eight.
Mm.
And then Illinois, honestly, I think Illinois is the hottest team in the country right now.
Yeah.
I mean, Io DeSumo and Kofi Coburn have been going off, and I think they're just going to run through the Midwest. Besides Oklahoma State, I don't really see a team in the Midwest that will be able to compete with Illinois. So overall, I got Michigan, Kansas, Baylor, and Illinois.
I have Iowa, Michigan, Nova, and Houston. So kind of contrasting to what you have, Amrish. I think Michigan, as you said, is going to get their crap back together. I think Iowa is somewhat of an unstoppable force if they can start to find their rhythm as well. I think Villanova they've been really good, especially recently. I just think Jay Wright is just a really good coach, and he's going to be able to essentially coach them into that Final Four.
That's going to be really interesting to see because I have them losing first round, so we'll have to see how that goes. I just think
Contrasting bracket.
I just think the loss of Colin Gillespie is just too much to overcome. Like, they were definitely not the same team with him gone. But I kind of the same thing as Ambrish. I think Baylor runs through the South. I think I got him playing UNC. I think they win that game. Purdue, I think Purdue is a sneaky good team, but I still got them over them. And then Baylor over Texas Tech in the Elite Eight. I think Texas Tech makes it there. I really like Mac McClung, but Baylor's just got too much firepower for them. And then same thing with Illinois. They're such a good team right now. Like Ayo DeSumo and Kofi Coburn, I think is the best 1-2 punch in college basketball, outside of Gonzaga maybe. But I just think those two guys are so hot right now that they're gonna run through the Midwest.
Who are your other two teams?
I got Iowa. I talked about them before. I think they beat Gonzaga in the Elite Eight, and then Alabama beating LSU in the Elite Eight. So
you have LSU. Okay, I mean you do have LSU beating Michigan and then beating Florida State.
Yeah.
All right. In the Final Four, I got Michigan beating Kansas. This is also granted that Michigan somehow finds the rhythm, and hopefully by then they'll have Isaiah Livers back. It's undecided, but if they can get Isaiah Livers back, if they can find some sort of rhythm, at least get the ball to Dickinson a little bit more. Because honestly, on that last play of that Ohio State game, they should have went inside to Dickinson because. At least in the last couple of minutes, Dickinson was handling the ball well and was definitely making some shots. So I did not like taking that step back three at all. And then on the other side, I got Baylor beating Illinois in a very close one. Honestly, I think the Baylor-Illinois game will be decided by 5 points or less because they're two very high-scoring offense. They have two teams with a very good defense. It'll come down to the wire on which team can outlast the other one.
Yeah, I think this could be a very exciting Final Four. I think if Iowa and Bama, I think that's an interesting matchup if they both make it there. I think Alabama's got that grit and grind mentality. But I just think Iowa has Luka Garza and the shooters. I think that's just going to prove to be too much. I think they win a close one. And then same thing with you. I have Baylor and Illinois. I think that's going to be the game of the tournament. But I just think Baylor has more experience and they've just been good. Outside of that COVID pause where they came back and they were really struggling. But other than that, they've ripped through this year. So.
Well, I am completely different from you guys on my Final Four. Although I do have both Michigan and Iowa in the Final Four playing each other. But of course I have Nova and Houston playing each other, which is they're just kind of wild card picks. I think that as you guys said, I think Houston or as you guys said, guys think Houston is overrated. I think they have something to prove. And I think they're gonna make it to the Final Four against all odds. And I think Villanova's gonna do the same. And I actually have Michigan and Villanova in my championship game.
So you have Michigan beating Iowa without Isaiah Livers or with Isaiah Livers?
With Isaiah Livers, they got to get him back. They have to find a rhythm. They simply have not been the same team without him.
Yep. So I have Michigan Baylor in my finals, and I think Baylor's gonna take that game. I'm a huge Michigan fan, but Baylor is I think it goes Baylor, Baylor and Illinois on one tier. Then you got Gonzaga, Michigan, and then you got basically everybody else. But before Michigan went to their little their COVID pause, they came out firing. However, after the Illinois game, their offense just hasn't been the same. So if they can get it back, I think they'll make the Baylor game close. However, it'll be a close game, but I still think Baylor will be able to outlast Michigan.
Yeah, I think Iowa Baylor is a very enticing matchup. I just think Luka Garza is gonna be too much inside, like too much for them on the inside, and then Maceo Teague and Jared Butler will be outplayed by Wieskamp and Bohannon, which might be bold, but I think that those guys, when they get hot, they do not miss a three.
That's a pretty bold prediction because, Maceo Teague and Jared Butler, honestly, I think are some of the best shooters in the NCAA, and every single starter on Baylor has over a 40% three-point percentage.
Wow.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a very high-scoring matchup. I just think, who's going to guard Luka on the interior, to the level that someone like a Coburn would, or even, maybe a Hunter Dickinson.
They do have Vital.
Yeah, but I just think Luka Garza's on another level, and then Wieskamp and Bohannon will do enough they'll be raining threes, and I think they win a close game, but
wow,
they win it nonetheless.
Yeah, those are bold predictions, guys. I have Michigan taking it. Brish, you have Baylor taking it. Anthony, you have Iowa taking it. I think it's going to be a great tournament this year. I love watching it every year, and it's just going to be the best.
I really hope it's not a blowout on any of the Final Four games because the nail-biters are always the best.
For sure.
Of course.
And I'm actually really excited to watch this year, especially since it's all going to come down to team chemistry with no fans in the stadium. So we'll see which team is able to persevere through these times. And good luck, boys, on your bracket.
Right.
Even though I think I have the best one, obviously. So.
Right.
Yeah,
No. Of course.
All right, boys. Well, that will conclude the first episode of the Impound Podcast. Thanks for watching or listening or wherever you get your podcasts.
This the end, oh yeah. Tell me, is this up and well? Can we get it back? They told me only time will tell. We can't let it go. This shit don't feel natural. Can we get it back, baby? Only time will tell. That's a fact. Knowing you ain't right. Crossing all these lines, making X's when you mine. Fuck all that. Girl, that ain't no good. Blow my shit like woods. Look, let's get this understood. Baby, in my eye. Remember all them times? Hit it, then rewind. Bend your back, puncture your spine. Every night. Spread your lips of two. Too bad ass up with a view. Now you're acting brand new.